have to recognize is that nobody ever thought until the 1900s that anybody could make anything illegal, because most people felt, as I do, that it would be unconstitutional to dictate to an individual what substances they could take into their body. Even in the early 1900s, the Sears Roebuck catalog used to sell injection kits with vials for chloral hydrate, for cocaine, and for morphine. You could buy these through the mail. You could go to your local drugstore in the early 1900s and you could get cocaine for the weekend right at the pharmacy, And the interesting thing about it is that there were no drug gangs back then, There were really no big mafiosos because it was legal and it operated within the regular market. Now, where things began to change was after Prohibition ended in '33, they needed some way of getting revenue and whatnot, and they weren't busting people for alcohol anymore, so Anslinger started pushing on the marijuana thing. So the big important date was 1938, and that was the passage of the Marijuana Tax Act. And that's the beginning of Prohibition in America, actually. And so in '38, all marijuana throughout the United States became illegal. Now, for a brief time during World War II, they allowed farmers to grow hemp again because the manila hemp from the Philippines was cut off and they needed hemp because they still needed it for the military. Now, the interesting thing about the Tax Act is very similar to what happened the other week with this financial bailout that Bush did. They just pulled a fast one on us. They just shoved it through, and that's what happened with the Tax Act. There was no review, there was no discussion, there was really nothing much being said about it. And it was only after that, in '43, that the LaGuardia study, Mayor LaGuardia from New York, he did his own study on marijuana, and his findings, which are consistent with all the findings that have come after that, were that marijuana just isn't that dangerous. There's no reason to have it illegal. So we had it anyway. And of course, here we are today, we've got 870,000 people getting busted every year just for basically, in many cases, just carrying some small amount of weed on them. And, it's just ridiculous. But when I started doing my magazine in '89, it became apparent to me what was going on, because in 1985, that's when the Reagan administration did the Just Say No thing, and that was the birth of drug testing in the workplace. So, after '85, more and more companies started drug testing people, and now, of course, to me, drug testing is an incredibly, it violates your rights against unreasonable searches and seizures. It's bad enough that they make you walk a line if you're, drinking, or give you a breathalyzer, but to actually demand that they get fluids from your body at will, was really a big concession on the part of freedom-loving Americans. And I should mention that, I wear a marijuana leaf, and I've worn a marijuana leaf for over 20 years now, and it's not really because of marijuana per se. To me, this leaf represents, freedoms that I hold sacred, and I think freedoms that all of us in this room should seriously demand that be held sacred. And as Justice Brandeis said many years ago, he said, the greatest right we have is the right to be left alone. And God knows we ain't being left alone anymore. We got people getting busted for .08 and all sorts of stuff like this, and it's just ridiculous because there are no fatalities in the range between .08 and .14. It's just about revenue. That's really all it's about. So then in 2001, next milestone would be Rainbow Farm. Is anybody familiar with Rainbow Farm here? Well, Rainbow Farm was on High Times 10 most hemp-friendly locations in the world. And in 2001, it was becoming a big bastion for activism. John St. Clair, you recall, John St. Clair was released from jail after John Lennon from the Beatles came to Chrysler Arena and did a big concert for John St. Clair. So he was there. We had all sorts of luminaries from the movement that would come out to Rainbow Farm, which is in Jones, Michigan. Well, in 2001, and I had dinner and lunch with Tom Crosland many times. He was the one that ran Rainbow Farm. And I was just shocked the morning I woke up and I watched the news. And 105 federal, state, and local police descended on Rainbow Farm, and they murdered my friend Tom Crosland. And this is a week before 9/11. Now, at first I thought, you know, it was just a coincidence, it was just a terrible thing. But then, of course, what happened the next week? 9/11. And of course, my opinion of 9/11 is that President Bush planned 9/11. He did it to gain control. He did it to push us towards this new world order. He did it to aggrandize the military-industrial complex and allow them to make billions, if not trillions of dollars off of unnecessary war. Well, this is my opinion. That's all right. So that brings us to 2001. Now, in 2007, Crystal Martinez was spearheading the medical marijuana in Michigan, and I helped her with that. I collected about 1,200 signatures for that drive, so about 1 in 400 signatures were mine for this drive. So because of that and many other things, I think, you know, you need to get out to vote. Now, myself, I really think, and I'll explain this in a minute, medical marijuana is a good stopgap. To me, it's not going to cut the bricks out of the wall, you know. That's what the medical marijuana thing is. But it's necessary, so everybody needs to go and make sure that that passes. So now we'll move to the present. The past was the building of the cage. The present is now. And I would subtitle now is the making sure the cage is not closed on us, okay? And so that brings us to this vote. So everybody needs to get out and vote, because that's going to push it back a little bit. And we need to do every little bit we can. Now, I guess that's good enough for the present. The future I would subtitle smashing the fucking cage, baby. Because we've got to do this. The window of opportunity is closing. Every year, you are being put more and more into an electronic cage in this country. Your phones are GPS devices. You can be tracked wherever you go. Your cars are going to have GPS devices. You'll be tracked wherever you go. Believe me, the government is tracking whatever you do on the internet right now, and they would like to cut the balls off the internet as soon as they can. So, this November, you know, everybody needs to vote for the medical marijuana initiative. But what I think needs to happen, and I'll explain why, is we need to completely legalize marijuana for adult Americans throughout the United States and hopefully throughout the world. And let me explain why. Because